Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Publius's Thoughts. Today, we are going to be talking about amending or repeal of the 17th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and why. This is going to be episode 6, and this is somewhat an area in which I am pretty good and familiar with. So, if you're not aware of what the 17th Amendment is, the 17th Amendment of the Constitution was adopted in 1913. It altered the election of U.S. senators on the federal level so they could be directly elected by the people of each state. Prior to this and stuff, and many scholars in many circles within the constitutional area realm believe this is when federalism was formally kind of destroyed, further erosion of the Constitution. But prior to this change, senators were chosen by the legislature of their state in accordance with Article 1, Section 3, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. So in other words, a state legislature would appoint that senator to represent the state within the federal level of the U.S. Congress in the Senate. And so, now, the theory behind that is because the fact that we are closer to and when we elect people at the federal, local, and county levels and stuff like that, you have more control at your voting and stuff because it's closer to the people. So those that you elect into the legislature is far more important because they're responsible for appointing a U.S. senator. Unlike we get all these random people in the U.S. Senate today and stuff who frankly don't represent their states. They represent themselves. They represent their corporate interest. And I think that if we could repeal the 17th Amendment, I think we could pull back a lot of what that is. Because, look, let's say that a state legislature would appoint a U.S. senator. Let's say 9 months to a year, maybe 18 months down the road, that U.S. senator kind of goes off the rails and is not representing the state in which they were appointed to. And so, instead, they could recall that U.S. senator and replace that individual with another person who would represent the states and stuff like that. There was no set ground rules in regards to how long they could serve and all that stuff. But those state legislatures could recall that individual. So I think that this is something that should seriously be looked at. I know right now there's a convention of the states and stuff like that, but I don't agree with a lot of what and where that was going. And the reason I say this is because they didn't put anything in there about 17th Amendment. They have everything in there about term limits and stuff like that, which I agree with. But I think if we got one body under control, I think that we could have a better set in terms of the House, you know what I'm saying, and all that. So in theory, the House is also supposed to be closer to the people because it's a lower chamber. And that's how it was supposed to work in the Constitution. However, most people aren't aware of how the original system for the Senate appointment ever existed and stuff like that. We hear about it here and there. People talk about it, but there isn't really much discussion about it because people tend to think you're trying to take their vote away. But the fact is that those at the state level, when you elect your state representative, they're closer to you because you have more power in the state than that of the federal level. You know what I'm saying? And so I know that it could be construed as controversial. Other highlighted opinions say that the true harm to this amendment has slightly laid out on this nation is in conjunction with an ever-expanding federal government. And Americans have a very short memory and stuff like that. You know, when I studied constitutional law. I studied political science and stuff like that on the federal, state, and international level and stuff like that. I actually had some professors who are friends with many of the Supreme Court justices, and the late Justice Scalia as well too. I got a really good rounding education and stuff. I went to a Cal U. I got laughed at for going to a California State University. And I have to be honest, my professors are pretty conservative and stuff. I can't say otherwise. But in looking at this further, democracy in its true form and stuff was harshly looked down upon by the Founding Fathers. Our country is not a democracy. Democracy is the worst form of government. It is considered something called mob rule, when the majority rules and controls everything and stuff and all that. And in Federalist 10, Madison writes, pure democracy can admit no cure for the mischief of factions. Hence it is that such democracies have been found incompatible with personal security. Aristotle spoke on this as well too, that democracies are very dangerous and all that. Madison is referring to the dangers of factions and stuff, either comprised of the majority or a large portion of the minority, acting in their own self-interest to trample the rights of minority groups. Madison feared democracy would lead him to favor a constitutional republic in which minorities are fairly represented and protections are granted under civil liberties, which we all know. And then you've got all these people are saying, well, the majority here and there, and I'm like, well, that's not really what they meant. And we really need to get back to these foundations of true, pure discussions with regards to the Constitution. Today, we just kind of overlook it, and to be honest, our Congress kind of tramples on it, no matter party. They both do it. For political reasons and personal reasons, they just don't care. And it's very disheartening for someone who went to school for a lot of this stuff to see what's going on, because I become very jaded in regards to what Congress does. So when I came out of college, I had this rosy picture of things, just like before I went to overseas, because I went through an Arab immersion program at the school I went to. And stuff like that, because I worked for a defense contractor that had several contracts over there. And yes, I was an IT director, but I also did other stuff considered secret squirrel over there and stuff like that. And I didn't learn about certain things until I actually went over there. So when I came out of college and I really started to kind of get my feet wet with regards to politics and stuff like that, I really became disenfranchised in terms of, or more disappointment, because I was like, dude, this can't be. Like my first political office that I worked in and stuff like that was with a supervisor, a county supervisor that I had deep respect for and stuff like that. And later on, he'd be indicted, not for money laundering, but for doing meth. I was like, holy shit, man, come on. You know, so I don't know, you know, and that wasn't what disappointed me, but just the way things worked and stuff like that. But in getting back to this, in Federalist 62, Madison explains the rationale for Senate appointment by the legislature, writing, "It is equally unnecessary to delay on the appointment of senators by the state legislature." He thought the system was fairly uncontroversial, as it had the double advantage of favoring a select appointment and of giving to the state governments such an agency in the formation of the federal government as must secure the authority of the former. And that is you, the voter, that votes upon that of state representatives that naturally, you know, make a selection. The emphasis he makes is on the importance of a balanced federalist system between state and federal government. And today we have forgotten that because the federal government encroaches on the state's rights. Like the federal government has no right to sue a state. It's in the Constitution. And yet they do it anyways. And stuff. The emphasis is the importance of a balanced federal system between state and federal government. This is why we fought a civil war in 1860 against the Union and the Confederacy. It was over states' rights. It was not over slavery. Yes, it was a catalyst, but it was truly over states' rights. Just like the fact that slavery was once upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court as an economic purpose and stuff like that. And look where it is now. It's gone, right? So, the Senate was meant to be a mere reflection of the House, but rather convenient link between the two levels of government through which states could have direct agency in the affairs of the Union. Now let me read that again. The Senate was meant to be a mere reflection of the House of Representatives, which is closest to the people, but rather a convenient link between the two levels of government through which states could have agency in the affairs of the Union. So if we look at the United Kingdom, England's Parliament and stuff like that, they have the House of Commons, which is close to the people. There's direct democracy there, direct electing there. But the House of Lords is appointments and stuff like that. But they're appointed by the crown or hereditary and stuff like that. That's what they wanted to avoid and stuff like that. So, and to properly check and limit the scope of the federal government. Again, we're talking about limiting the control of the federal government, which they have too much control today. The states require a way to meaningfully influence its activities to function within a federalist system in which the feds today have too much power in that regard. The Senate no longer provides such means under the 17th Amendment by incentivizing senators to act as populists rather than serve state interest. Who here can tell me that any of the senators act in the interests of their states instead of themselves or that of Wall Street or big business or big corporations? You can't. There might be a few and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying? The result of the state's diminished role has been an escalation of controversy and issues to the federal level that dominate the toxic political stage and fuel polarized sentiments today that we do know, right? The federal government was never meant to run roughshod over state legislatures. The whole point of having state government is to account for the divergent views among the geographical and political diverse people across the country, across the Union. And we don't see that today and stuff, do we? And all that. An appeal of the 17th Amendment would grant more importance to elections for state legislatures because voting local representatives would provide a means for indirect vote for the senators. This increased local civil engagement may result in positive by engaging more voters in local issues. And what is more affected to you on your daily, situation? Your state has more influence on you, how you vote and why you vote. Admittedly, the bicameral legislature, two bodies in the House, that's what bicameral is and stuff. There's a House and Senate. Structure has maintained the balance established in the Sherman Compromise by fairly representing populations of states in the House and equal representation in states in the Senate. But it could better serve the balance by reverting to the old system, which I believe is what we need to do. I think that it would play a better role, a bigger role on the national level, because states would have more in the game and more on the line, and the battles of elections and discussions and debates would probably be a much better than it is today. One may also look at the ineffectiveness of the 17th Amendment. And this is a good point. It was popularized and adopted due to the perceived corruption and inefficiency that marked indirect elections in the early 1900s. Has the amendment really remedied such corruption? And I can say absolutely not. There has been also many polls in and throughout the country within the last 2 decades that some people don't really necessarily understand what that is and all that. So it's kind of like a 52-55% approval of amending it and stuff like that, which it would take a lot, but I think it would have to go through the states because Congress just has no will to actually do anything. But Americans may not like giving up their direct votes for the Senate, which is also a legitimate answer and a concern. They may not like the fact we do not enjoy a democracy, but we're not a democracy. We're a federal republic with a federalist system. But these systems of federalisms have a purpose, and to ignore them is at our disadvantage as a people. It's time we start treating the Senate like it's time that we stop treating the Senate as the all in all and return control to the states. So I'm going to end it here. I'm going to be doing a write-up on this and stuff like that. This will be coming out later. I'm trying to do a bunch of videos so that I can get ahead of my stuff and all that stuff. So my stuff will be dropping over time and stuff like that. I'm trying to do maybe probably 2 videos a month and stuff like that. And but let me know. We're coming up to about 17 and a half minutes. Let me know what you think. Were you aware of this? Is this something that's on your mind? Is it something that you feel passionate about? I'd really, really like to know what your thoughts are. But I want you all to take care. Peace out. And bye, everybody.